This is big. Tyler Joseph just put out a tweet full of 2 pages of text confirming and denying a number of different rumors that we've been seeing circulating around regarding the rollout of Breach and what that's going to mean for the band. So I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to read the entire thing. Everyone, I'm sure, has already seen this, but there are a couple things I wanted to touch upon that I think are quite significant and really interesting, and bittersweet in some ways as well. So Breach is now finished. I think everyone kind of assumed that that was the case, but there certainly was some debate about when exactly it was going to be finished, or if it was still in the works, if they're still finishing up the recording process for that. And that's why it's been so silent. We haven't been getting quite the same rollout as we have seen for other albums. And that could be why, and there certainly is some implication here that it was only recently completed, but that isn't necessarily the case. But it is done. We do know that for sure. Now, in the second point here, it confirms, yes, Drum Show is coming out, as we know. It also very clearly hints that Josh may be singing on this track. He obviously will be drumming, clearly. But this is now the second hint that Tyler has dropped that Josh is going to be doing more than drumming and probably will be contributing some vocal tracks to that song, which will be cool to see. Unless, of course, this just means that Josh is going to be directing the music video for Drum Show like he did for Backslide off of Clancy. I think that's probably unlikely, given that after doing that, after directing a music video, Josh said, that's cool, but I probably don't want to do that again. So that's probably not what's going on here. And I certainly think they wouldn't be teasing it in quite the same way if he were going to just be directing it again. Because when he directed Backslide, they were very clear about the fact that he had directed that music video before it came out. And then again, this next sentence somewhat implies that Mark directed the music video, not Josh or anyone else. Confirms it's not going to be a lore video. I think we all kind of knew that based off of the teasers that we had seen, but it's good to have that confirmation. And then tells us, and this is quite important, the ending of that story, the story of Dima and Clancy and Torchbearer, not the Torchbearer. Torchbearer is just a name. The end of that story takes place in the music video for the album's opening track, City Walls, and it comes out with the album on September 12th. So that's pretty big, that we're getting the end of the story when the album releases on September 12th. There were some rumors, or not really rumors, there was some speculation about whether or not that was going to happen. We didn't have any way of knowing either way. And that's now confirmed that City Walls, the opening track, is going to end the story, and it's going to end on September 12th. It's not going to be at the end of the tour. It's not going to be a year from now. Release day, story's going to end, and we're going to get the complete end of the story all packaged together with that album. I'm very excited about the video. It's going to be quite important. I'm curious how long it's going to be, if it's going to be kind of equal in length to Paladin Strait or potentially even longer. Not sure yet how long City Walls is going to be, so there's really no way to guess at that, but it certainly is going to be a significant music video. It also seems to imply, although this isn't necessarily the case, but it seems to imply that there are only going to be 2 lore videos for this album, not 3. So it'll be similar to something like Skilled and Icy. Trench we had 3, Clancy we had 3, Skilled and Icy we had 2. Breach, we might only get 2, the contract and City Walls, which somewhat makes sense because it does seem like there isn't as much of the story left to tell, right? We're at the end. But they could still do more lore videos for other songs on the album to fill in some gaps or do flashbacks to parts of the story, as I mentioned in the past. That is a possibility, but I don't think we can count on that based off of this. And in fact, I think it's kind of unlikely that they're going to do that. It also seems to be unlikely that they're going to do a music video for every single track off of the album. There's no mention here of robot voices, so that kind of debunks the theory that Robot Voices is going to be one of the other singles off of the album that's just going to come out with the album. And it also seems to confirm that there's going to be 2 singles before Breach comes out, and then City Walls the day of the release, not like the day before or anything like that. So there will just be a total of 2 singles. And then Breach. Now, the revelation that City Walls, the opening track of the album, is going to end the story has confused some people. Obviously, even when the track list was initially revealed, and it was understood that the contract wasn't going to be the opening track, even though it seemed to pick up right where Clancy left off, there was some confusion there about, okay, how do these music videos align in terms of the timeline of the narrative and the track list order of the album. So in terms of the track list, we're going to get the ending, and then the contract is kind of in the middle between Paladin Strait and City Walls, but that comes later on the album. So obviously they're not telling things in order, which does lend some credence to the idea that we could get another music video after City Walls and potentially after the contract on the track list that still is part of the story, and in terms of the timeline of the narrative still comes before City Walls. But this final sentence here, but then the story is over, seems to indicate that won't happen. City Walls is going to be the end, and they're not going to tell the story anymore after that. In terms of music videos, I think, as we'll see on the next page, the music might still continue telling the story in some ways. I think this second page and this final point is the one in which it finally hits home for many people that the story is coming to an end. Third, we have a US tour coming up this fall, which is going to be pure magic, and I cannot wait. But then after that, I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's our last tour ever. I'm just saying, other than maybe some festivals next year, it will be the first time in our career we won't know when we will tour again. We're not giving Breach a proper world tour, and our fans outside the States will not get a tour. So that debunks the theories that there were going to be more tour dates added to the Breach tour beyond what we've already seen, or that there's going to be a world tour afterwards. This is it. There's going to be a last leg of the Clancy tour, the Breach leg, and that's over. Now, it's important to emphasize here that he's not saying they're never going to tour again and they're not going to do music again. But what he is saying is that for the first time in their entire music career, they're going to take a hiatus like they've never taken before, longer and more indefinite than the hiatus post Blurryface. It's going to be a true hiatus. They don't have any date set, anything in mind, anything planned for next, which I think is good, because if they really are going to come back at some point with music that exists outside the story that they've been telling, in whatever shape that takes, a new story or no new story, new music, new style, a new direction for the band, to fully separate themselves and distance themselves from this story, which has now ended and needs to end, a full, blackout hiatus is probably necessary. Besides the fact that throughout all of this, there is sort of an undertone of exhaustion. We see this here. I'm so pumped for you guys to hear this record. Breach took everything I had left. So yes, this note of uncertainty, which they don't know, and by extension we definitely don't know, when they're going to return from this with new music, is somewhat sad. But I think it's more bittersweet. I think it's a very good thing that they're doing this. And in fact, I'm more excited to see what's going to come next after this, their next chapter of the band, because they're taking a break this long. And many of us, myself included, but many fans, have been saying for a while that they're probably going to do something like this. Everyone kind of expected it. In many ways, they've been hinting at it for a while. They're also older, they have families and so on. It makes sense. But that doesn't mean there isn't a bit of sadness knowing that the story is truly ending. And this chapter that's lasted arguably for 8 albums, but we can argue about that later, it's coming to an end. Whether or not the story has existed for 8 albums, the 21 Pilots that we know, I think, is going to look slightly different. It is never going to look like it has for these past 8 albums. New song and video on Monday for Drum Show, new tour in the fall, new album September 12th, with a new video that wraps up over a decade-long story that has meant so much to us. It's going to be awesome. Thanks for doing this with us, Tyler. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. This was just a very quick update on this new post from Tyler Joseph, which I think is quite significant for everything, all aspects, their music, their story, the tours, everything. I have been putting out quite a lot of content over the past day or so because quite a lot has been happening, and I most likely will be doing another video on Monday discussing Drum Show and its video when that comes out. Be sure to comment your own thoughts on this announcement and everything, the end of the story and all of that below, and don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.